Hello, how y'all doing?
The Jimi Hendrix Experience.
I'd like to dedicate this show to the American Deserters Society. Gun in your hand. Hey, Joe. I said, where you going with that gun in your hand? I'm going out to shoot my old lady. Oh, I'll probably mess around with the band. I'm going out and shoot my old lady. You know, I'll kind of mess around with another man. No, that ain't too cool, baby. Hey, Joe. I heard you shot your lady down. You shot her down the ground. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. I heard you shot your lady down, you shot her down in the ground. And he said, yeah, baby, I sure the hell did. Yes, I shot my baby. You know I gotta mess around town. I gave it a gun.
23 Brook Street, London. The first blue plaque in London dedicated to a modern music star can be found here in the middle of the Mayfair district. This is the site of the first floor flat Jimi Hendrix occupied with Kathy Etchingham from late 1968 through 69. It was to be the first blue plaque to be given to either a pop musician or a black person in Britain, and it was to be presented to the public by Pete Townsend, Noel Redding, and Kathy. Noel was later to tell me that he and Jimmy would often spend hours working on new material or ideas on arrangements in that apartment. I also heard later that many musicians would follow Jimmy home there for after-hours acoustic jam sessions, amongst them Roland Kirk, members of Traffic, and many others from the London scene.
Jimi Hendrix was born in 1942, November 27th. The name he was given at birth was Johnny Allen Hendrix. Lucille and his father, James Allen Hendrix, later changed it to James Marshall Hendrix. This was during World War II. Al was in the Army at the time. Jimmy was not the only child born to the family. It's been later determined through years of research that he actually had several brothers and a sister, but unfortunately the family wasn't well off. And money was tight and times were very tough. Several of Jimmy's brothers and sisters were either sent to family homes or to other foster parents, and so it was basically just Jimmy and Leon, his brother, living at home there with the father, James. Jimmy's musical roots probably came from his father Al's record collection. Al had everybody on vinyl back then, going from B.B. King to John Lee Hooker to Muddy Waters to Lightnin' Hopkins to Bessie Smith, and he would play those constantly, and I'm sure Jimmy also heard those on a jukebox at the occasional record shop. Listening to those and having those ingrained in his brain at the time, he just picked up on that natural rhythm of those blues and rhythm and blues singers. The story goes that he either picked up a broom and started pretending like he was playing guitar, and then I believe his father got him a ukulele and then an acoustic guitar for $5 that he wanted a poker game. When Jimi Hendrix was in high school, he had an eagerness to play. By this time, he'd already got a guitar and an amp, and he would go to this place called Spanish Castle just outside Seattle, Washington. And one of the stipulations that he made with the producer of these shows was that if somebody's guitar or amp broke, that he got a chance to get up and play up on stage there. And he later wrote about that in a song called Spanish Castle Magic. But he floated in out of different high school bands, but it really wasn't going anywhere, and probably not fast enough for him. He got in a little trouble with the law back then. He said he was trying to help out a school charity by taking some clothes, but police saw it differently, and he went to juvenile court for a while and spent some time in juvenile hall. But in an effort to get out of doing some prison time, let's say that, he got the offer to clear up his record by going into the Army, and his father also agreed to that. That would probably be a good way to shape up this young man's life.
Redding. On drums, Mr. Mitch Mitchell. On vocals and guitar, Mr. Jimi Hendrix, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Yeah. Now dig something right here. I'm gonna tell you something first of all. Yeah. You don't care for me. I don't care about that. You got a new fool. I like to like that. I have only one itch in his eye. Let me stand next to your mouth. Let me stand, baby.
mug me?
Am I gonna mug you?
Is that gorgeous or what, eh?
And I believe I can run a decent marathon.
Thank you very much.
Download Saville now.
Jimi Hendrix joined the Army in 1961 and soon made friends with another musician called Billy Cox, and they hit it off quite well. Although Jimi Hendrix didn't have a guitar then, and he had to have his girlfriend send him his prized guitar, which he named Betty Jean after his girlfriend. They played in various different bands in the Army and some off-site bands. So they hit it off big, and Billy Cox has said too that he thought that Jimmy would have gone on to several other bands, and yes, he did. He hit it off big with the rhythm and blues scene in the Nashville area. This was Jimi Hendrix's probably most misunderstood period. If you listen to the more popular records at the time, the Are You Experiences and the Axis Muldens Loves, you can trace Jimmy's rhythm and blues roots from this time period. People like Curtis Mayfield, the Isley Brothers, Little Richard, Ike and Tina Turner, and the list goes on. This was Jimmy's internship into the music business. By this time in Jimi Hendrix's career, I think he had grown really tired of touring and not getting paid. Playing with bands like Little Richard, I think he really intentionally missed the tour bust sometimes, and found himself in New York City, living in Harlem there. Broke, his guitars in the pawn shop. He came across a character known as Curtis Knight, and Curtis was happy. It so happens that he was looking for a singer and a guitar player, and got Jimmy's guitar out of the pawn shop. Curtis took Jimmy down to meet a record producer named Ed Chalpin. Ed had a studio and it was all set up. Jimmy had his guitar out of the pawn shop and was eager to play, so they just set up a series of gigs in some of the local discotheques, and they also began some recording. Ed Chalpin, I believe, realized Jimmy's true talent and offered him a contract. Unfortunately, Jimmy wasn't the best businessman and signed a contract which later came back to bite him for $1. But Jimmy had forgotten about it, and from there, Jimmy went on to find a little bit better scene of music where he could let his hair grow, and by this time, the music was starting to change. We were starting to hear a little bit more psychedelia in the music, and he started to form his own band called Jimmy, James and the Blue Flames, and they bounced around from clubs from here and there and played with people like John Hammond Jr. and several other rock bands and folk bands at the time. It caught the ear of several other record producers, as you will. It turns out that Chaz Chandler, bass player from the Animals, who was leaving the Animals, decided to go down on the advice of Keith Richards' girlfriend to check out a place called the Cafe Wall, and heard an incredible guitar player, Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix was very, very special. Andrew had a female friend called Linda Keith, whose father was a broadcaster on BBC called Brian Keith. And we were all in New York, and Linda said, "Come to this club tonight. I want to show you an absolute sensation." And Andrew was absolutely off his face. And Jimi Hendrix came on and played what I would say was one of the greatest sets I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely phenomenal. All the hits were in the act, the guitar behind his head, the lighter fuel, everything was in there. And I said to Andrew, we've got to sign him. And he said, can't sign him. This was his big mistake. Can't sign him, he said, because guitarists will never be that focal point. I said, I think you're wrong. A couple of months later, we get a call from Eric Clapton, and he says, you've got to come to UCL tonight. We've got a great guest artist. So fine, we went. And Eric does this thing in the middle of their set, saying about how great this next guy is, and out comes Jimi Hendrix, who plays the same set. Absolutely magnificent. I can't find, it was real rock and roll. And I said to Andrew, we should have signed him. He said, I've never seen him before in my life.
We didn't rehearse that much. I said, boy, we never rehearsed actually. And we'd say, well, it's in so-and-so key, and we'd play it, which we did.
They went out on the English circuit, and fairly soon people like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck and various other English guitarists enthused about Jimi Hendrix's ability.
Tell me, Jimmy, why do you play guitar with your teeth?
Well, actually, I really don't play with my teeth. I play it with my ears there.
Hey, Jimmy, what do you think of American Cops?
American Cops? Oh, man, it's really great, man. They got some groovy uniforms, stripes down their pants, clubs in their pockets. Wow. About to say. Guns.
Tell me, Jimmy, do you smoke?
No.
Hey, Jimmy, why do you wear your hair like that?
Yeah, well, these hair strands here, each one stands for a vibration, and they're all supposed to be good. But, oh, there goes a strand there.
Chas Chandler produced a few early singles for him, such as Hey Joe, Purple Haze, The Wind Cries Mary, and these were all massive hits because Jimi Hendrix was able to perform them so dramatically that they were almost bound to succeed.
When Jimi Hendrix and the Jimi Hendrix Experience were beginning, they also had to start out with some of the other acts that were well known at the time and were coming along in the music charts in Britain. And some of those people were like Engelbert Humperdinck, Cat Stevens, the Walker Brothers. In fact, he was on tour with them. But to set the Jimi Hendrix Experience apart from that, they had to come up with an idea. And I believe it was one of Jimmy's road managers that got the idea of setting his guitar on fire, of all things, during the playing of the song Fire. And somebody snuck a can of lighter fluid to Jimmy and said, do this and do that. Set the guitar on fire. He smashed it up, threw it out into the audience there, and they quickly left the stage. And it's history after that.
I mean, the first time I seen him was at Ondine's. It was down by the 59th Street Bridge in New York in 1967. I went there with Eric Burden, and I believe Chas Chandler brought him over that year, and then I seen him at their first showcase, which was some club in Shepherd's Market in Mayfair, when they had Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell. Then he did the Saville Theatre was going in those days, which Brian Epstein owned or bought, and I seen him at the Saville Theatre, and that was a great stage for him. I mean, that was when I really seen how great he was. Yeah, I think he was very different to any other guitarist. I think not only was he great, he was different. There was no one else like Hendrix.
1967, Hey Joe had began to go way up the charts there, which was followed by this very strange song called Purple Haze. A lot of people think Purple Haze is written about some strange acid trip that Jimmy had, when actually it's it goes back to some of Jimi Hendrix's science fiction roots. It's actually about a novel that about a strange world and this purple mist and everything like that.
I kiss that guy. Put my hands all around. Don't know if I'm coming up or down. Am I happy or in misery? Whatever it is, that girl put a spell on me. Help me, baby. Help me, baby.
The songs were getting longer. The themes were changing there from your quick 2 and 3 minute pop singles. So things were definitely starting to change on the airwaves and probably in the minds of us young folks. They were starting to turn on to the music and other things like LSD.
Or just the end of time. No, help me, baby. Hey, yeah, hey, yeah, hey. Oh, baby, you got me going around. Not necessarily stone, but beautiful. Thank you, and good night and peace. Peace to you, and happiness. Thank you.
Hendrix and his group, The Experience, kept hitting these songs that became very successful. And at the time really wasn't the pop festivals that were as we know them now. And a couple of creative geniuses got together the idea of forming the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. And Paul McCartney of the Beatles actually suggested Hendrix be on the bill and got him on the bill of the Monterey Pop Festival. After blowing away the press and the public with his stage performance at the Monterey Pop Festival, Michael Jeffrey gets the bright idea to put Hendrix on tour with the Monkees. And if you recall, the Monkees at the time were a big hit on American TV. They had a weekly television show playing their bubblegum pop music songs for everyone to enjoy the teeny bopper crowd, that is. This did expose Jimmy to a wider American audience, but probably not the audience, definitely not the audience that Jimi Hendrix was after, the more slightly older hip crowd. Well, things were really starting to click for the Jimi Hendrix Experience at that point. They started a tour of England with Pink Floyd, who were also purveyors of psychedelia and their wild sounds. So there were some tour dates with Pink Floyd opening up for the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And this is also the time when the band wanted to get back into the recording studio, and they started recording Acts as Bold as Love at Olympic Studios. One of the great stories I remember of the engineer Andy Johns, who assisted Eddie Kramer at the time, was Andy was setting up the mics for, I believe, the song Little Wing, and Hendrix had his amps up so loud that when Andy was out there adjusting the mics, getting them set up, everything like that, Jimmy just went and strummed the guitar. It's so loud that the sound was so loud that Andy jumped up off the floor like a chicken standing on a hot plate, and his ears just immediately shut down. It was just to give you an idea how loud Jimmy played at some time. Hendrix was a genius and a genius composer, and he was always writing something down on every scrap of paper he had for ideas, from songs to even a movie manuscript. He was eager to perform some of these new songs on stage and test them out and see how the audience reacted to them. 1968 was a great year for the Jimi Hendrix Experience. The act was alive. Unfortunately, his management put him on what could probably be best described as a dartboard tour. They'd play Seattle one night on the West Coast, and then jump into the Midwest, and then back on the East Coast up to New York, then down to Florida, and this would go on day after day, night after night. Spring of 1968, Hendrix started finishing up some of the recordings for Electric Ladyland, which was the third LP for the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Yeah, he has a song called Little Miss Strange. This is the beginning track on one of the sides. It's a fourth-sided LP. He has a beginning track on one of the sides.
He moved back to America. He'd made a couple of albums in Britain. Are You Experienced? Acts as Bold as Love. And then he made a third album called Electric Ladyland. It had an amazing cover. It showed 30 or 40 nubile young women naked. And this, of course, caused a bit of a sensation.
I think there was still this problem with the image of the band, what the teeny bopper press would report them as, and what the FM underground hip scene had their image. So there was a lot of conflict there. And there was a lot of internal conflict in the band. Mitch and Jimmy hit it off the best, but Noel kind of wanted to stretch out with kind of a more folkier sound. And if you listen to some of the recordings at that time, Noel was kind of wanted to get one of his songs on the LP. Sort of reminds me of George Harrison, the Beatle, kind of screaming for, "Give me a position on this record, please, too. Let me show my side of it too." The band started to splinter and started going to different directions, and you can hear that in some of the 69 recordings. Jimmy would kind of go off in one direction, Noel would play a solid bass line, and Mitch would stretch out on kind of a jazz riff that he was into there. So it was obvious that the band was starting to separate. During the summer of 69, Hendrix had an idea to expand the band even further, casting aside Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell, and bringing back in his old Army buddy, who he promised that one day, when he made it big, that he'd bring back in Billy Cox, the bass player. There were so many ideas that they tossed around at the time. I mean, they wanted to bring in gospel singers, they wanted to bring in a horn section, and none of these ideas never gelled. Unfortunately, it would have been nice to hear all those elements in Hendrix's music come to fruition. But what they did was they formed a group called Gypsy Sun and Rainbows, and they played the Woodstock Festival. There were some experimental tryouts at a house in upstate New York near Woodstock, where they got the band together. They had Larry Lee on rhythm guitar. They were desperately looking for a drummer. They had Juma Sultan, who filled on percussion and some of the great rhythm instruments, African rhythm instruments that he was playing at the time. None of the drummers at the time really fit the bill, so Jimmy made a call to Mitch Mitchell and got Mitch Mitchell to come back from England. What Mitchell realized at the time were these guys, Hendrix aside, really didn't have their act together, that they really had trouble, as Mitch said, I think, had trouble counting. They couldn't keep the timing going.
This man was in the 101st Airborne, so when you write your nasty letters in...
Nasty letters? Wow,
right.
you really
Well,
try
people,
hard.
when you mention the national anthem and talk about playing it in any unorthodox way, you immediately get a guaranteed percentage of hate mail from people who say, how dare
That's not unorthodox. That's
anyone...
not unorthodox.
It isn't unorthodox?
No. I thought it was beautiful. But then there you go.
It was July of 1970, and Hendrix was starting to mature. And if you look at the films and the photos of 1970 versus 1967, granted it's only a small, short 3-year period there, but here's a guitar player that has really been around the world, experienced a lot, and is starting to become a well-respected guitar player. And you can hear it in his playing, in his stage presence, that still he's only 26 years old, and he's just gathered this amount of respect and knowledge of the guitar playing, and you can see that in some of the films there, like Atlanta Pop Festival in 1970 there. He just looked like a professional guy, not just some kind of wild, whacked out kid there playing loud guitar there. After his time off in Maui there and relaxing for a couple of weeks, and Warner Brothers was getting excited for Hendrix to complete this final double LP, First Ray of the New Rising Sun there. So Jimmy got back into his recording studio and started finishing up some of the tracks there that were starting to gel. It was time to start paying for the Electric Lady Studios, and they set out on a European tour. First up was the Isle of Wight Festival, sort of a Woodstock for Europe, but Hendrix had a cold at the time, and he was starting to play different climate zones, and these concerts weren't very scheduled and organized as they are now, and he would sometimes play on at 2 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, and different time zones, and it was all starting to catch up with him, as you can see in some of those films back then. On this final European tour, one of probably the most horrible concerts that Hendrix ever ended up playing took place in Denmark. It turned out to be, unfortunately, a short 20-minute show. It was either Hendrix's health or some drugs that he was given before the concert that took place there that just ended the show rather abruptly. Fans were told they would get their money back, and refunds were given later, but it was kind of unexplained. If you listen to the recording of it, Hendrix is rather spacey, talking about just some sort of gibberish, is playing this slow and sloppy, and he just ended the show and just left in a taxi and headed back for the hotel. Also, to add chaos to this confusion, Billy Cox, his bass player, was spiked some acid. One of the drinks at one of the shows there. He tried acid for the first time. I mean, granted, Billy had never taken some of these hard drugs before, but somebody spiked the punch with some acid, and he had a very horrible experience, delusions, paranoia. It was so bad that Jimmy decided to send him back home to Nashville so he could recoup with his parents and just kind of get himself back together. The tour had to be canceled. Jimmy returned to England with Mitch Mitchell, and they tried to regroup and try to figure out where they were going to go to next. I mean, obviously management's upset. Tour concert goers wanted their money back from these tickets they bought at the tour. The record company wanted some product out there real quick there, but nothing was gelling. Mitch Mitchell, his wife, had just given birth to their first child, and so it was chaotic, and it was confusing, and Hendrix was all caught up in the middle of it, during all this pressure given to him at that time. The last few weeks of September, and unfortunately the last few weeks of Jimi Hendrix's life, were very chaotic. The final show that they performed at the Isle of Fay-Marne on September 6th was just incredible. There was a group like the Hells Angels, a motorcycle club there, who were hired for security, but ended up burning the stage down, and people were shot at.
I was doing a roadie set for 10 years after on the stage, and Hendrix was playing, and it was one of the last things, I believe it was the last set he did before he died. Tons and tons of these backpatch bike gangs turned up. Some friction started between them. They all started fighting. We could hear shots in the background. Hendrix was getting really, really upset, and we thought, this is crazy. The sets were brilliant. I mean, most people just came to see Hendrix because of that fantastic experience he did. But when Hendrix came on stage, just everything stopped. It was amazing. There was no one backstage. They were actually off the stage doing anything. Everyone, from the drivers to the caterers, you couldn't even go and get a cup of tea because there was no one there. Everyone just watched Hendrix because it was so amazing. It was so brilliant experience. After he'd done his set on stage and we got backstage, we just sat there 2, 3 in the morning drinking Jack Daniels, smoking. There was a load of girls there. They were sort of, there's girls unconscious on the floor. There was people just floating about. But he was so laid back about it, His music still now influences people today, and people are still, there are new bands coming out, and they're still trying to copy Hendrix.
But in these final few days of Jimi Hendrix's life, he spent with a young lady who was only 24 at the time, Monica Damman. He had met her the following year in England, and spent just only a few days with her, but she had grand illusions of becoming the next Jimi Hendrix girlfriend, hopefully wife, and spent some time with him. But Hendrix, I don't know, I just saw her as a temporary girlfriend. She wanted to come to this party that Jimmy was going to the night before. He went back to New York to finish up some of the final recordings on the first ray of the New Rising Sun. Purposely didn't invite Monica to come, but returned to her flat where one of his favorite guitars was, this beautiful black and white Stratocaster, Black Beauty, and he spent the final night with Monica Damman. Monica, who had experienced an ice skating accident, she was an ice skating champion in Germany, retired, had some pills for pain, Vesprax, and she left these around, and Jimmy wanted to catch up on some sleep before he headed back to New York. We'll never know exactly what happened in those final few hours of Jimi Hendrix's life. Some of the research that's been done on those final few hours kind of point to a young lady, Monica Damman, just unexperienced on how to handle the situation. Hendrix had gotten sick in his sleep, vomited, was still breathing, but instead of calling the paramedics right away and trying to find who his doctor was and how to get him involved with this, she called Eric Burdon. Eric Burdon was asleep at the time. His girlfriend answered the phone, and in a panic, Monica just kind of cut their conversation short. Eric called back and got a hold of Monica and told her to call the paramedics right away, that this was an emergency situation. At that point some of the stories differ. Monica says she called paramedics. Paramedics say that when they arrived at the flat, Hendrix was there by himself. Monica wasn't there. He was covered in a pool of vomit and wine. He'd been dead for possibly over 5 hours. And it's a shame that he had to go like that, and he really didn't have to die. Had Monica been more on the ball on that time and less naive of what to do, I think we'd still have Jimi Hendrix around today.
It was very sad. Somehow not unexpected, because he did like his drugs. And I've got to say that it was no great surprise, a tragic loss, but not a huge, shock to the world.
I think self-indulgence was what killed him.
He was a great musician. Sometimes it seems sad that we lose a musician like that, but it's actually part of the legend.
It's very difficult to predict what might have happened to Jimi Hendrix had he survived.
Hendrix's body was flown back to Seattle, Washington, where he was born and raised. It's kind of odd that he had told several people that he'd be going, next time he returned to Seattle, he'd be going back in a pine box in a casket. Unfortunately, he never lived to be 28 and never got a chance to finish some of his ambitions and some of his wild dreams. It just didn't happen. Unfortunately, Hendrix left us too soon, and his legacy still remains, and is still one of the greatest guitar players of the 20th century, maybe perhaps even the 21st century.